Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this mini lesson, Stephen's going to be teaching you a finger-picking etude, which is written using a 2-5-1 chord progression. Now this is the most popular progression in all of jazz music, and I thought it would be fun to kick off this lesson talking about how this progression works from a music theory standpoint. You see, jazz harmony is notorious for moving in fourths, but before we understand moving in fourths, we have to understand moving in fifths. And to do that, let's take a look at the circle of fifths. Question 1. I'm a beginner ukulele instructor. What's a great way to demonstrate using the circle of fifths to new music students? So let's take a look at the circle of fifths for those that are unfamiliar with it. As the name implies, and as you can see, we have a giant circle that moves clockwise by fifths. So if you look at the 12 o'clock, you can see the note C. Now, we want to consider C1. So you're going to count up 5 from C. You have C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so we got from C to the 1 o'clock position, which is G. So we moved by 5. Let's do it again. We're considering G1, so we go G, A, B, C, D. Awesome, now we got to D, right? Same thing, D, E, F, G, A. Let's go again, A, B, C, D, E. The first thing you want to do is make sure that they understand that we're going by 5. So the next thing that you can do is you can make it fun. A really cool idea that songwriters do is to use a chord progression that moves by fifths. So if we start at C and we go C, G, D, A, E, well, hey, that sounds like a song I know. Sounds like Hey Joe by Jimi Hendrix. Sounds a little bit like this. We have a 4-bar phrase where C and G get 1 bar, then D and A get the 2nd bar, and then E gets bar 3 and 4. So it sounds a little bit like this. So what you could do is you could teach them that song, and you can simplify it if they're a very beginner, where they're just strumming on 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can sing along, and it gets them playing, and they'll have to call out the chords as they go along. C, G, D, A, E. And they have to realize that that movement is C, D, E, F, G by 5 every time. So a really, really cool concept that you can pull from the circle of fifths is that you could write a chord progression that moves by fifths. Now on the contrast, another cool example that you can give your students is that if you move counterclockwise, the circle doesn't go by fifths, but it goes by fourths. So this time around, instead of starting on C, let's start on D. So if we consider D1, we have D, E, F, G. Okay? And if we consider G1, we have G, A, B, C. Okay, so we just have 3 chords this time. Now, if we consider C, the key that we're going to be playing out of, and you've already taught your students how to harmonize C major, then they should know that D is the 2 chord, G is the 5 chord, and C, of course, is the 1 chord. So when we harmonize C, we end up with D minor 7 to G7 to C major 7, or the chord progression of 2, 5, 1. Now 2, 5, 1 just so happens to be the most popular chord progression in all of jazz. So you could literally open up to any jazz standard and pull tons of 2-5-1 chord progressions out of there. But if your students are younger, maybe they're not going to be so much into jazz, that a great example of a 2-5-1 as a recent pop hit is Maroon 5's Sunday Morning. So I believe that song was in the key of C. So that means that you would be playing 2 bars. You would have D minor 7 for beat 1 and 3 to G7 for for beat 3 and 4, and then to C major 7 for the second bar entirety. So you would have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, you can sing along. You can teach them that. You can simplify those chords as well too, and you can have them play along, but make sure that they understand that we're going D, G, C, moving by fourths, which is the circle of fifths going counterclockwise. So pretty fascinating stuff. Now, if I've piqued your interest in music theory and you want to continue diving down the rabbit hole to learn more, definitely check out our music theory course. I'll also link it in the description box below. It teaches you the fundamentals of music theory, but goes a step further, and this is the key. It teaches you how to apply it and actually use it in your playing. Now, let's take a step back and let's talk about this etude. So I would say that this piece is going to be perfect for the beginner intermediate level player. So it's not super challenging to play, but what is cool about it is that it teaches you how to play a 2-5-1 in 2 positions. So you're going to learn those chords down here at the beginning of the neck, and then you're going to learn them once more up here midway on the neck. So that makes it extra fun. Now, let's talk about the lesson. So in this video, Stephen is going to be teaching you how to play the entire piece, but if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, that's going to be available at this link right here, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com and do a search for ML22. That is the lesson number for this lesson. Now also on that page will be the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer. Now this is a great feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you wish. Just a great asset in learning this tune that much easier. So last but not least, go ahead and grab the high G ukulele to follow along with, and I'll hand it off to Stephen to teach you how to play this.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this Rock Class 101 mini lesson. For this lesson, Andrew has composed a really beautiful little fingerstyle piece based on a 2-5-1 chord progression. So essentially this piece is really just a musical study or an etude, so a piece of music that is composed to practice a particular musical concept or technique. But all of the truly great etudes are more than that. They are wonderful pieces of music in their own right, and I think this composition from Andrew more than meets this criteria. Now I am a total sucker for major 7th chords, I just love them, so I may be a little biased, but I think this piece just flows with such an elegant beauty that I can't stop playing it, and I really hope you enjoy it too. So make sure you've got your high G ukulele and let's get into it. This piece is just in 4/4 time, and the rhythm is fairly straightforward throughout this piece. There are some tricky chord shapes and chord transitions in the second half of this piece that may require a little bit of extra practice for the left hand. They certainly did for me, but other than that, there's nothing too scary going on here, so this should be a fairly nice chill piece to learn. For the right hand, we'll probably go with a fairly standard PIMA picking technique, so the thumb will play the G string, index finger will play the C, middle finger takes the E string, and then the ring finger plays the A string. Okay, so for the first 4 measures of this piece, we want to think of those A string notes as our melody, with everything else being harmony. So if I play just those A string notes from the first 4 measures, that would sound like this. Okay, so to achieve that separation that we want between the melody and the harmony, we just want to make sure that we pick out those A string notes with decent volume while suppressing the harmony by just picking those notes just a little more softly. Okay, so with that in mind, measures 1 and 2 should sound like this. Okay, so the rhythm for both of these measures is 1, 2, and 3, 4. And then for beat 1 of measure 1, we want this D minor 11 chord. So we'll do a full downstrum of that chord on beat 1, just making sure we hit that A string so that melody note comes out nice and clear. And then for the rest of the measure, we just pick notes of this chord. So we keep the chord held, and then on beat 2, we hit the C string, and then after beat 2, we hit the E string, and then on beat 3, we hit the open G. And those 3 notes just a little bit softer because they're harmony. And then on beat 4, we go back to that A string third and pick that a touch louder because that's our melody note. Okay, so just that measure 1 once again. Bit slower. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Okay, and then into measure 2, we want to turn this now into a G7 chord. But for this measure, we're going to have the same rhythm and the same picking pattern that we've just played. So fairly straightforward. All we need to do is drop that third finger onto the A string 2nd fret. The pinky comes off, the other 2 fingers stay where they are, and then we're in our G7 position for beat 1. And like in measure 1, we strum through that chord, and then pick the same strings, so the C string on beat 2, followed by the E string, then the open G, and once again they're a bit softer because they're harmony, and then on beat 4 we hit this A string at the 2nd to finish off that measure. Okay, so just measure 2, and then with measure 1, Okay, so just one more thing I want to mention here. Because of the way this piece is composed with that full chord on beat 1, which then rings out through each measure as we pick notes of that chord, I think maximizing sustain is really important when we perform this piece. All of the notes and chords want to ring out for their maximum duration and then seamlessly blend into the next one. So to achieve that, just make sure you keep good pressure on each chord throughout each measure, but then keep that chord held for as long as possible. Try and time your chord changes so that they happen just when you're ready to play that new chord. If we change chords prematurely, then that's going to stop the notes from ringing, and then we'll lose that sustain that we're trying to achieve. Okay, so once again, measures 1 and 2. Okay, so let's have a go at playing those two measures through together now. 1, 2, 3, 4. And on to measures 3 and 4, they should sound like this. Okay, so for measure 3, we have the same rhythm again as measures 1 and 2 and the same picking pattern once again, but the chord change this time is we're coming to this lovely C major 7 chord. So from the G7 where we were at the end of measure 2, this is another easy transition because all we need to do is take the first and second fingers off, leave that third finger on the A string second, and then we have our C major 7 chord. So we strum through that on beat 1. And then on beat 2, we hit the open C, followed by the open E, and then the open G on beat 3. And then we come back to the A string second, our melody note, on beat 4. Okay. Nice. And then into measure 4, we have a change in the rhythm here. We're just playing on the beat, all quarter notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So beat 1, probably the easiest chord of the whole piece. We're just going to have a C6 chord, which is all open strings. So we just take that third finger off and then play that chord on beat 1. But we do want to hear that open A as our melody, so make sure you catch that string when you do your down strum. And then on beat 2, we just hit the open C. And then on beat 3, we'll add the second finger onto the C string at the 2nd fret, pick that single note, and then finish off with the open E on beat 4. As you pick that, I'd probably take the second finger off so it doesn't ring over that note. Okay, so just that measure 4. And then with measure 3. Nice. So let's have a go at playing those two measures through together now. 1, 2, 3, 4. So measures 5 and 6 are just the same as measures 1 and 2, so we're playing that D minor 11 into the G7 chord once again. And then measures 7 and 8 should sound like this. Okay, so measure 7, we're playing the rhythm 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and the first part of the measure is the same as measure 3, so we start on this C major 7 chord and do a full strum of that chord on beat 1, and then on beat 2 we hit the open C, followed by the open E, followed by the open G on beat 3. But then we continue this run of eighth notes. So on the and after beat 3, we're going to hit the A string at the 2nd fret. And then that note and all the notes that follow it into measure 8. We'll probably class all of these notes now as melody notes, so we'll hit them with good volume. So the and after beat 3, A string 2nd, we pick that note and then pull it off onto the open A for beat 4. So to get that nice clean snappy pull-off sound, just kind of flick the finger downwards off the fretboard, sort of flick it off the string, and that'll get a nice clean pull-off sound there. Then the and after beat 4, we hit that open G to complete that measure. So measure 7, and then into measure 8, we continue this run of eighth notes, so we're playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then beat 1 is this open C, followed by the C string 2nd, so the 2nd finger will take that. Then we go to the open E, and I would probably take that 2nd finger off as you play the open E. And then E string 1st with the 1st finger, followed by E string 3rd, the 3rd finger will take that. Then we go to the open A, and I would take that 3rd finger off as you play the open A. And then as you pick the open A, just start moving the hand up, because then on beat 4, we want to land the 2nd finger on the E string 7th. Okay, so just that run of notes for measure 8 quite slowly. But then at tempo, it's probably going to sound more like... So that can be a little tricky run there at the desired tempo to get those notes nice and clean and keep that consistent rhythm through those notes. That can be a little bit tricky. So to help with that, I would probably use alternate picking with the right hand so that we're not repeating the same finger twice for consecutive notes. Okay, so there's no real sort of right and wrong in terms of how we achieve that alternate picking. A common way of doing it is just to start with the index finger and then alternate to the middle, back to the index, and keep kind of going like that. So I don't do it quite like that because I'm a little bit unconventional. I just kind of do whatever feels comfortable. So for me, when I play this, I start with the index finger on the open C and then alternate to middle, back to index, back to middle, back to index. But then when I hit the open A, I tend to use the ring finger for that. Just because that seems to feel comfortable. I usually play the A string with the ring finger, so it just feels natural to use that finger there on the open A. And then the middle finger plays that E string 7th. Okay, so my way of doing it, index, middle, index, middle, index, ring, middle. Okay, so have a little play with it, you know, try my way. If that feels strange, just try going between the index and middle. As I say, there's no right or wrong really, just whatever feels comfortable. But if you can, just try and avoid repeating the same finger, and that'll just help you generate that speed that you need. Okay, so once again, measures 7 and 8. Nice. So let's have a go at playing those two measures through together now. 1, 2, 3, 4. So on to measures 9 and 10, they should sound like this. Okay, so the rhythm and picking pattern for these two measures is just the same as measures 1 and 2, but these chords are much trickier than they were in measures 1 and 2. This is where it gets a little bit difficult for the left hand. I think these chords are quite difficult. So the D minor 7 chord for beat 1 of measure 9, I mean, that's quite a difficult chord to hold anyway if you're not familiar with that kind of shape, but also the transition into it from the end of measure 8 is also quite tricky. So if we think about where we were at the end of measure 8, we played this the E string at the 7th on beat 4, and that rings for a quarter note. It is quite important that you use the second finger for that note because that will allow us to transition into this chord a little bit more smoothly. What we'll do is we'll move that second finger up 1 fret to the 8th and then flatten it down so it also frets the A string at the 8th. So both strings together, so kind of like a little hinge bar there. And then the third finger loops onto the C string at the 9th and the first finger takes the G string 7th. So that is quite a tricky chord anyway. But then to get into it from this run is quite tricky. So I'll probably practice that. I found that quite difficult. If you're finding this a bit of a sticking point and you're getting frustrated, try and be patient because I think that is a really difficult chord to hold and a difficult transition. So bear with it and be patient. But once you're in position and you've played that on beat 1, the rest of this measure now, we're just picking notes of this chord as we did in measure 1 really. So we're playing the C string, followed by the E string, followed by the G string, and those three are harmony, remember, so a little bit softer, and then we finish with the A string 8th on beat 4, which is our melody note. Okay, so measure 9. Okay, then into measure 10, we want to turn this into a G7 chord, which again isn't too bad, but it's not the easiest of transitions. We want to be here when we're on the G7 chord and we're coming from this D minor 7, but actually the fingers are sort of in the right shape for the G7. We want these two fingers, the first and the second, just to come along to the 5th fret on the C and the A, and then the third finger drops onto the 7th fret of the E string so that we're there. Okay, so just try and kind of keep the movements as efficient as possible. Don't take that chord off and then think, right, what we're doing now, G7. Just try and think about moving the fingers, I suppose, the shortest distance possible. Yeah, so from here, just kind of imagine where they're going to be and just nice, efficient, short movements to get them in position. Okay, and then once you're in position, it's that full strum of the G7 on beat 1. And then we play the C string and the E string and then the G string on beat 3, followed by our melody note of A string 5th on beat 4. So just the same picking pattern again. Okay, so once again, measures 9 and 10. Okay, and as I say, if that takes a little bit more practice than the other measures, don't worry too much about it. Just have that patience and that will come soon enough. Okay, so let's have a go at playing those two measures through together now. 1, 2, 3, 4. And into measures 11 and 12, they should sound like this. Okay, so a lovely little run of notes there over this C major 7 chord. I love the sound of this chord. So beat 1 of measure 11 is this C major 7 chord, but a different version to how we played it earlier. We've got this bar chord version. Sounds absolutely gorgeous, but to hold it isn't all that fun, if I'm honest. And this is another quite tricky chord, I think. So again, if we think about our transition, we were in this G7 shape in the previous measure, measure 10. So to get into this C major 7, it's not too bad because we're kind of in the right area. We're just going to drop this first finger onto the G string at the 5th. Second finger just comes off. And then this third finger wants to kind of bar the C string, the E string, and the A string at that 7th fret. So we're going to flatten it down across all 3 strings And that can be quite tricky to do, to get all three fretting nice and cleanly. Can't even do it myself. There we go. So again, practice that one. If it's tricky, don't worry, because it is quite a difficult chord. Okay, but once it is in position on beat 1, that's it. We just hold that chord now through measure 11 and measure 12. And this kind of picking pattern, these eighth notes that we're going to play, I would probably think of these as kind of 3 blocks of 4 notes, because there's a kind of repeating picking pattern that we have here. So we play the chord on beat 1, rings for a beat, and then on beat 2 we hit the C string, followed by the E string, followed by the G string, and then the A string. There we go. So those 4 notes there. And that's our kind of block of 4 notes that then repeats again. So once we've played it once, we then start that run again, which takes us into measure 12 there. Then we play it again once more. And then we finish off with this quarter note on beat 4 of measure 12, which is just back to the C string. Okay, so I think it helps to think of it as that kind of 3 blocks of that repeating pattern. With the quarter note at the end. Okay, so the whole 2 measures, measures 11 and 12. Nice, lovely couple of measures then. Right, let's have a go at playing those 2 measures through together now. 1, 2, 3, 4. So measures 13 and 14 are just the same as measures 1 and 2. We'll have that D minor 11 into the G7 chord once again. And then into the final 2 measures, measures 15 and 16, they should sound like this. Okay, so for measure 15, we're just playing on the beat or quarter notes, and then beat 1 is this C major 7 chord, which we strum through on beat 1. And on beat 2, we hit the open C. And then on beat 3, we want the open A, so the 3rd finger comes off just in time to play that note. And then we finish the measure on beat 4 with the open G. Okay, as you're playing those 2 notes, the open A and the open G, I'd probably start moving your hand up towards the dusty end, because when we get into measure 16, we want to be getting up towards the 15th fret here. Okay, so when we get into measure 16, we're just playing on beat 1 and letting that ring over beat 2, and then we play again on beat 3. So beat 1 is just the open C, so that's easy enough. But then when on beat 3, we want to hold this C chord of A string 15th, which I'd probably play with the pinky, and then the E string at the 12th, which I'd play with the 2nd finger, other 2 strings open, and then we'll just strum through that chord on beat 3. Okay, so those 2 measures once again. Okay, so the only other thing to mention here is you can see those 3 letters RIT just above the C major 7 chord there. That's short for ritardando, which just means that we're kind of slowing the tempo down as we move through these final 2 measures. So once we've hit that C major 7 chord on beat 1, we're just slowing things down. Just to finish off the piece quite nicely there. Okay, so let's have a go at playing those last 2 measures, measures 15 and 16, together now. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Alright guys, so this mini lesson was a lot of fun. We got to learn the most beautiful chord progression in all of jazz music at 2-5-1, and we got to learn how to play it twice. Once down here at the beginning of the neck, and again up higher on the neck. So I hope you guys enjoyed learning this piece, and I do want to give you a friendly reminder before we wrap up that if you did want to get the tabs to print off and keep for your records, that was available at this link right here, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com, do a search for ML22. That's the lesson number for this lesson. Don't forget too, on that page was the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer, so you can literally hit play, watch that tab scroll across in real time, highlight bars, loop sections, slow it down, all that fun jazz. So again, I hope you enjoyed learning this tune, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.